Alright everybody, welcome to my exam for Essay 1 video. I'm going to go over some kidney stuff. I'm going to be honest, I hate the kidneys. This sucks to learn, but here we go. So first off, we're going to talk about filtration and how that works. So right here we have, this is kind of a piece of our nephron. Nephron is just this, essentially your main kind of cell in your kidneys that does all the filtration, reabsorption, secretion. Essentially gets stuff that we want to keep in our body, allows it to keep, and it's able to like excrete through urine all the stuff we don't want. I won't go through reabsorption and secretion. I kind of drew everything out early because there's a lot to draw out and a lot to go through, and I've got a party to go to, so I don't want to be here all day. So first off, for filtration, here we have this capillary bed. This is called your glomerulus. And it's in your Bowman's capsule in your kidney there. And so what's going to happen here is we're going to have all these different pressures. We're going to have some hydrostatic glomerular pressure, which is about 55 milliliters of mercury. And that's an outward pressure. We're going to have our BCOB or our BCOP. And that's just like our Bowman capsule pressure here. That's an inward pressure, about 28. We have a capsule pressure here of about 10. Now those pressures is what it's going to do is we're going to have kind of an outward pressure here, okay, because it's out. And what it's going to do is it's going to push blood through here, and about 20% of our cardiac output ends up coming through our nephrons, and then we filter about 20% of that per nephron. And so what happens here is all this pressure is going to push that blood through. There's like this kind of this endothelial layer here, and it's got all these different holes and pores, and so it's going to push all these filtrates through. And so there's certain criteria it's got to meet. It's got to be small enough to fit through those pores, which is about 6 to 15 nanometers. It's also, it can't be negatively charged, so no negative charge, because we already have a negative charge in here. So if it's negatively charged, it's not going to go through very good. And so it's very specific for what it filters out there, okay? And kind of this filtration rate we see here, kind of the rate at which things are getting filtered through here. That's going to be your glomerular filtration rate, or your GFR, which is a common kidney marker that lots of doctors and nephrologists are going to measure to see how well your kidneys are functioning. And the way we are able to measure that is through a concept called clearance here. Now clearance is essentially the rate, or kind of the ratio at which stuff is being excreted through urine and filtered through plasma in your blood. And so it's kind of formula how we figure that out is our urine concentration times the rate divided by our plasma concentration of that substance, okay? Now our GFR, it's about 125, I believe it's milliliters per minute. I think that's the unit that we use. About 125, okay? And so that's essentially what clearance, again, is what it's telling us is how much stuff is being excreted through urine, like how much stuff is being filtered, kind of. It's like your glucose, it's gonna, like not all of your glucose is gonna be reabsorbed. So what you're gonna have like a higher plasma concentration of glucose, but you're gonna have a urine concentration of 0. And so like 0 times rate, that's gonna be 0, divided by your plasma concentration is gonna be 0. So your clearance of glucose is gonna be 0. Nothing's kind of getting reabsorbed, essentially, is what that's saying. What we want to measure is our GFR, so we need something that has a similar clearance to that, which is going to be creatinine. So you kind of use the clearance of your creatinine to measure our GFR, and so on, okay? So that's about it for filtration. Now, our nephron, what's going to kind of do, so this is our glomerulus. It's going to kind of curve through here. And where's my red marker? Let me check something really quick. Just double check the name here. Yep, okay, that's right. So what, kind of going around this, you're gonna have all these capillaries going around these tubules of your nephron. Those are called peritubular capillaries. And so the ions and everything that we want to keep in our body, keep in our blood, is going to get reabsorbed into those capillaries. So it's going to be filtered through like our glomerulus and our Bowman's capsule. And it's going to go through these tubules. And essentially, depending on where you're at, is where things are reabsorbed, which is stuff going from our tubules or from our filtrate into the blood, or where stuff is being secreted, which is where we're taking stuff from the blood and bringing it back into the filtrant. Eventually, until the final step, which is going to be excretion, which in this case is going to be through urination, which is just when we get rid of anything we don't want, okay? So let's go through it. So let's start in this section here. This is called our proximal convoluted tubule. And this is where the majority of reabsorption happens. So about 70% of water is going to be reabsorbed here. And so what's going to happen, this is essentially like a cell. So if we took this tubule here, we'd have, I guess we'll go, kind of go that one. We'd have like the lumen of the tubule on one side of the cell, which is right here. On the other side of that cell is going to be those capillaries or the blood. And so to reabsorb stuff, we want to get it back into the blood, okay? So in this, what's going to happen is we're going to have all these different transporters, all these different proteins, and they're using different gradients to get stuff into the cell, okay? So a lot of this, we're using the driving force of sodium, or that downhill gradient of sodium wanting to come into the cell, or use that to bring other things in. So you're going to bring in amino acids, they're going to come into the cell. Lactate's going to come into the cell. Glucose is coming into the cell. Calcium's coming into the cell via sodium. And then, so all those things are going to come out of the lumen, so out of here. So it's all been filtered through here, and it's coming in, and we want to keep that stuff. We want to keep glucose. We want to keep amino acids. We want to keep sodium. So what we're going to do, we're just going to run it through here, and eventually it's going to pass through the cell and get into the blood, okay? And again, we have some sodium, potassium pumps. So we're going to secrete some potassium, but it's ended up going to get reabsorbed anyway. There's potassium leak channels. And then we're going to reabsorb some sodium, so that gradient. But there's a few other things that are different here. We're going to have a transport. It's going to use that same downhill gradient of sodium. What we're going to do is we're going to kick hydrogen ions out. So we're going to secrete hydrogen ions. Kick it back here into the filtrant. And using a enzyme called carbonic anhydrase, what that's going to do is it's going to combine hydrogen ions with HCO3 bicarbonate. It's going to combine those to make CO2 and H2O and water. And so our water, it's going to kind of just be passed through, and it's going to be reabsorbed into our blood through. There's in between cells, these gap junctions aren't very tight. So they're going to pass through. There's also going to be some channels, some ovoporins. They're going to pass through. So water is just getting reabsorbed here. CO2 is going to diffuse back into the cell. We're also going to have some water in here. Again, that same enzyme, carbonic anhydrase, is going to cause the reverse of this. So we're going to have some HCO3, some bicarb, and some hydrogen ions. Again, we're just going to kick those hydrogen ions back out, and we're going to repeat that cycle. And using our bicarb out here, what we're going to do, or in the cell, we're going to reabsorb that bicarb back into the blood because we wanted to keep our bicarb there, okay? So that's about it for a proximal convoluted tubule, reabsorbing a lot of ions, a lot of sodium, lactate, calcium, things you want to get back into the blood, and then we're also going to secrete some stuff, but only so we can reabsorb certain things or have things diffuse to be able to reabsorb bicarb right there, okay? So that's it for that section. Now for this section, this is our proximal straight tubule. Essentially what's happened here is we're going to have kind of that same thing. We're going to have some sodium come in, and we're going to kick it back out. We're going to kick out some hydrogen ions again. Now what these hydrogen ions are going to do is we're going to find some anions out here, gonna kind of combine together. So then this isn't gonna be charged. And since it's non-charged, it can just diffuse back into the cell. Once it gets in the cell, it's gonna separate again. And then we're gonna use those anions, we're gonna use that gradient, or we're gonna use the gradient of chloride. Chloride's gonna come in, it's gonna kick that anion back out. And then this chloride is gonna go through a CTFR channel, and that's how we're gonna reabsorb chloride here, okay? So that's what's going on there. And now, let's see here. So now the rest of this section here, this is called our descending tubule. And essentially, all we're doing in the descending tubule is we're reabsorbing the rest of water. The majority of water was reabsorbed in our proximal convoluted tubule, but we're going to reabsorb the rest of our water here. So we've got some algoporins here, and water's just going to come out of our filtrate back into the blood. So we're going to keep that, okay? So that's here. Now this whole section is going to be permeable to water. So what happens here is we're going to have in our filtrate, we're going to have all this stuff kind of coming through, all the salty ions. They're going to be coming through here. So what that's going to do is it's going to boost our osmolarity a little bit. So it's going to boost the concentration. So we're going to start at 300. But again, this is permeable to water. So water is being reabsorbed back into the blood. So now it's going to get extra concentrated. So as we're moving down, we're just going to concentrate that more. This is called, gosh, I always forget the name. Let me find it really quick. Oh, our medullary concentration gradient. So again, this side's permeable to water. All that filtrant, that salty filtrant, water's leaving, it's being reabsorbed. Eventually we're going to reabsorb some of this stuff too, but overall our concentration is just going to go up with the water leaving, okay? Okay, so now let's go to the other side here. So now kind of going back up this curve here, this whole section here, this is going to be called our ascending tubule. Now what we're doing here again is we're going to use this protein we saw when we talked about years. That's our sodium, potassium, 2-chloride channel. So what we're doing is we're bringing in some sodium, we're bringing in some potassium, and bringing in 2 chlorides, and then through some leak channels and our sodium potassium pump, we're going to reabsorb those ions as well through that, okay? Now our macula densa here, which is kind of that top curve here, before we get into our collecting duct. Now what we got here is this one is just trying to regulate sodium chloride and measure it. So if it's too high, too low. So sodium chloride is going to come in and we're going to reabsorb that as well, okay? So that's what's going on here. And now the last one is the collecting duct. There we go. Let's see here. Move this just a tad here. Okay, so now we have our collecting duct. Now in our collecting duct, we're trying to reabsorb some more water, okay? Now we're trying to, essentially what we're trying to do in the collecting duct is we're trying to concentrate our urine. So we're just peeing out urine, just stuff we don't want. And so how we're going to do that is we're going to reabsorb lots of water, okay? So it's going to happen here. We're going to have some sodium channels. So sodium's going to come in. We're going to have some potassium leak channels. So reabsorb some more sodium and potassium here. But now we have kind of this G protein here. And we're also going to have some algoporins. So water's just going to be flowing through and reabsorbing here as well. But in these algoporins, what's going to happen is it's going to react to ADH. Now let's go back, kind of back step a little bit. We're going to talk about something called the RAS system. So let's see what's going on is we have renin. Now renin is produced in your kidneys. Renin is going to combine with angiogenesin to form angiotensin 1. And then we're going to have an enzyme called ACE, which is going to convert angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Now what angiotensin 2 does is it's going to boost ADH levels. The ADH levels, that's antidiuretic hormone. And so what happens there is essentially ADH is going to come in and it's going to bind to this. All right, hold on. Yes, yep, okay. So ADH, it's going to bind to this G protein, and it's going to go to this vesicle, and this vesicle has a bunch of oligporins. So now we're going to open up some more oligporins, and more water is going to be flowing through. So we're going to reabsorb a lot more water via antidiuretic. If we had like a medication that blocks that, or like a diuretic, what would happen is it's kind of keep that, you wouldn't reabsorb as much water and you'd pee out a lot more. So people that are on diuretics have to drink a lot of water. Unless they're trying to, like wrestlers, they'll take diuretics to cut weight. So they're just using it to secrete more water and get rid of it. So that's what's going on there. Another thing in our RAS system that will happen is we're going to boost aldosterone levels. What aldosterone does is it enhances sodium-potassium pumps. So you're going to reabsorb even more sodium. And with that, via osmosis, the water is going to follow that reabsorbed sodium. So you're going to reabsorb even more water. So your blood volume is going to go up and your blood pressure is going to go up. It's like a lot of times when this pressure is going down in our glomerulus, we're going to have osmoreceptors. They're going to detect that. They're going to detect, I guess we have some baroreceptors that detect the pressure. Osmoreceptors, they detect the osmolarity. But when that's low, it's going to fire this system. So it's going to boost our aldosterone levels, increase our blood volume, which is going to increase that pressure to allow our GFR to stay constant, okay? So that's what's going on there. Now last thing with our collecting ducts is they've got cells, intercalated cells, that respond to the alkalosis or acidosis. So if we're in acidosis, we're going to have these type A cells, which is acidosis, for acid. And so what's going to happen is we're going to bring in some potassium, kick out our hydrogen ions back into the filtrate, because we don't want it in the blood. Our blood's acidic, we don't want that. So we're trying to kick out these hydrogen ions into the filtrate. We have some CO2 diffuse in, but then we're going to use chloride. It's going to come in, and when the chloride comes in, we're going to send out some bicarb. We're going to reabsorb that bicarb. And so the bicarb can do its thing, bring down the pH, or I guess boost the pH, and take care of this acidosis. Now our type B cells, that's for like base, so for an alkalosis, essentially the same thing's going to happen. We're going to use chloride to kick out bicarb, but back into the lumen of the filtrate, or of our tubule. And then we're going to use potassium to come in, and we're going to kick out the hydrogen to do its thing, to bring the pH down and make it more acidic, because we're in alkalosis. So essentially we're just switching sides of where's. So our hydrogen is going to go into the blood, while here our hydrogen is going into the lumen of our filtrate there. Okay, so that's our collecting duct. Now the last thing here that we need to go over really quick. Again, kind of how we're going over our concentrations. This side here is permeable to water. So lots of water is leaving, which is going to increase the concentration of our filtrate. And then right here, we're not permeable to water, but we are permeable to salt. And so what that's going to do is then we're going to reabsorb lots of salts, essentially. And then our concentration is going to go down, because we're not going to have as much salt in our filtrate. Okay, so that's gonna go out. Our macula densa, we're gonna have an osmolarity about 100. And then our collecting tube, again, we're trying to concentrate our urine there. So then what's gonna happen is we're gonna reabsorb more water, and so then our collecting duct is gonna start to increase in concentration again. So that's kind of how all of our concentration loops kind of go, our medullary concentration loops. To be honest, I need to study it more, because I don't fully understand it. So that is a very, 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 very superficial understanding of how it goes. Definitely not as in-depth as we want. But that's essentially it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time.